How's that? Is that okay?
Okay.
All right, great. Great. I hope to address 5 myths today and 1 half myth. At least it's something we hope to show as a half myth. And one of your representatives is working to help us and the whole country on that. First myth, refugee resettlement is a public-private venture with its implication that support from private sources plays an important role. Second, that the program is covered by federal dollars only and places no burden on states and localities. Third, that the program pays for itself as refugees quickly become economically self-sufficient taxpayers. Four, that refugees are thoroughly vetted before they arrive, and that federal money, 5, in the program acts as a fiscal stimulus. The half myth is that you have no choice in the matter because this is a federal mandate. We're hoping that that's not really a myth, but that's what we are in the process of addressing right now. I've been following refugee resettlement for about 25 years. I had a sort of a low-level job with the U.S. State Department that had me over in Russia for a period of 2 years. Actually 1 year with the U.S. State Department and 1 year in another capacity. But unusually, many of the people at the embassy did not speak Russian, and many of them were under a non-fraternization policy protocol. I, on the other hand, was encouraged to fraternize with locals and also a Russian speaker. Everywhere, or quite often, I would get the question, is it true if I go to the United States, I can retire on government benefits? And I had to scratch my head and said, yeah, well, technically, if you go to the United States as a refugee, you could retire on government benefits, or something that would seem to be a retirement. However, I don't think it's quite right for you. But anyway, at that point, I realized people in Siberia and in Central Asia knew more about the refugee program than the average American. The program we have today began with the 1980 Refugee Act, the work of Ted Kennedy and Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the state of Delaware, by the way, takes almost no refugees. You do know that Texas is the leading refugee state, right? It's a state that takes more refugees than any other state. It is based on, 1980 Refugee Act is based on UN treaties and agreements which most industrialized countries have signed on to, and most do take refugees in varying numbers. A refugee, by legal definition, must be outside of his or her country and have a well-founded fear of return because of persecution based on membership in a race, religion, nationality, social group, or political group. And it's very important to meet one of those categories. You just don't get over here just by saying, I'm persecuted. You have to prove that you're a member of one of those groups. Congress, the administration, and the judiciary have stretched these definitions beyond recognition. Did you know that individuals claiming to fear China's one-child policy are members of a political group? That's Congress's opinion. They passed a law saying, putting them automatically in a political group so that they could ask for asylum and meet the requirement. Did you know that schizophrenic Tanzanians are a social group for purposes of qualifying as a refugee, as are single mothers from Guatemala? The U.S. has long been leader in resettlement and typically takes more than twice as many refugees as the rest of the industrialized world combined. And here I'm talking about a formal refugee program. I am not talking about or comparing our program with the unexpected and unplanned influx of immigrants into Europe. What's going on in Europe, of course, is even more dramatic and damaging than our program. But I think we will see when we add up all the numbers that we are only just a little bit behind Europe. I feel, in fact, that we are in a fight to avoid the fate of Europe, particularly the fate of Germany and France and some of the Northern European countries. The number of refugees we take each year is set by the President. The UN Refugee Agency decides who comes in under that quota, and an influential international network of private federal contractors implement the program on the ground. On average, about 90,000 refugees have been admitted per year since 1980. But There are other humanitarian immigration categories which have the same rights and entitlements as refugees, such as asylum seekers. 108,000 came in seeking asylum in 2014. Cuban Haitian entrants, they run over 20,000 a year. Trafficking victims, and so on. Together with refugees, the total of strictly humanitarian arrivals has been running in recent years about 150,000 per year. In addition, we must add the 50 to 60,000 per year of unaccompanied minors that started a couple of years ago and are still going. And it's felt that they'll still reach another 50 to 60,000 of this group. So that's easily 1 out of 5 legal immigrants, and I understand the unaccompanied minors are not necessarily legal right away, but they're on their way to legality. And they are a client, if you will, of our own DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement. 1 out of 5 legal immigrants is here not because of what they offer the U.S., but because of some victim status that they have been able to claim. That's 1 out of 5 that are in effect clients of Office of Refugee Resettlement. No one ever expected that it would come to this overwhelming number. And add to that the 500 to 700,000 illegals that manage to get in annually, and you are close to what Europe is getting this year in unplanned flows. It's still not quite there when you compare population and so on. And as I say, we are, the European situation is special. I feel like we're in a fight to avoid what Europe is undergoing now. Traditionally, refugee resettlement was a work of true sacrificial charity, where sponsors and charities committed to maintaining and supporting the refugees with housing and employment, even medical care if needed. Refugees were not allowed to access public assistance. The sponsor bears all costs and responsibility under this model. This helped guarantee assimilation and provided a natural regulation of the inflow. If there was no jobs, if there was no housing, if there was not enough contribution for medical care, they would not be sponsored. That's just that simple. Unfortunately, and as I said, this guaranteed assimilation and regulated the inflow. Unfortunately, this is no longer the case. Private sponsors have morphed into federal contractors, and they act exactly like federal contractors. They're no different from Lockheed Martin or anybody else. Their role basically is linking up refugees to social services, and in many cases providing low-cost labor to certain employers. But basically, I was told directly by a director of ORR, Office of Refugee Resettlement, that is their role, linking them up with social services. What was once the responsibility of a private charity and private sponsors has been turned over to the taxpayer by giving refugees access to all forms of welfare upon arrival. And their sponsors, ever eager for more business, there are federal and state contracts, along with an opaque stream of grant money from seemingly every government agency except NASA. One of the main drivers of this program is that there is no cost to anyone. Only profit, or no direct cost. We know there's a cost to everyone, but there's no direct cost. Add in Chamber of Commerce support, which is significant and a big driver of this program. The support of social justice warriors, the professional left, and a very lazy media, and you have the makings of a never-ending program. There was, by the way, a tiny remnant of the private sponsorship model that was started in the early 90s and lasted for about 5 or 6 years. Basically, it ended because of lack of interest. In other words, there was a means for people to bring them over privately if they really wanted. But the program was discontinued for lack of use.
Can I speak up just a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. And also, there is a car, a Lexus out front with the lights on. BR is the first 2 letters, so didn't want anyone's car. You got a Lexus. Is it a Lexus, I think? I think it's, the lights are on facing this way. Can you speak up to the fan?
Sure, okay, is that a little better? At least until the late 80s, the U.S. picked the large majority of refugees for resettlement to the U.S., or excuse me, until the late 90s. The U.S. picked the large majority of refugees for resettlement. But in recent years, up to 95% of refugees coming to the U.S. were referred by the UN or were relatives of UN-picked refugees. The United States has State Department personnel or federal contractors in 40 different locations, considering 60 different nationalities referred by the UN. As I said, some contractors have also set up shop overseas, where they virtually hang out a shingle explaining how to use the program and how to qualify for the program. And by the way, if you come in and apply for asylum, and asylum means I show up in the country either illegally or overstay a visa and say I want to be an asylum seeker, you also have to